I never believed in accidents. Not when it came to my daughter. The night they lowered her into the ground, every word from the priest sounded like static. People said tragic slip, bad luck, God's will. I heard only lies. Her body had bruises and places a fall couldn't explain. Her phone was wiped clean, too clean. And my gut, the same gut that once saved me in street fights and back alley brawls, told me one thing. Somebody made this happen. And I already knew who. Ethan, my son-in-law. Too smooth, too polite, too perfect when the cops questioned him. The kind of man who rehearses sympathy in the mirror before stepping outside. I stood by her grave, fists clenched in my coat pockets, the cold dirt smell rising into the evening air. The December wind cut through my jacket like razor wire. People hugged me, whispered condolences. Their voices blurred, but his voice, Ethan's, rang clear. He told an aunt. She was always clumsy. I warned her about those stairs. Those stairs. My daughter ran track. She had balance like a cat. I'd taught her footwork myself, back when she was 10. She didn't just fall. No damn way. 2 days later, I found the first crack in his story. In the police report, Ethan said he was working late the night she died. But her neighbor swore she saw his truck in the driveway around 9. When I confronted him at the house, he smiled, like I was an old man losing memory. Maybe she saw wrong. People get confused at night. His eyes never blinked. That's when I decided to test him. The city was hosting a charity sports tournament at the rec center. Wrestling, lifting, endurance drills. Ethan signed up, showing off like always. My daughter used to joke that he avoided the gym. Couldn't even do 10 push-ups without complaining. But that night, under the fluorescent lights, I watched him take down men twice his size. His stance wasn't gym-taught, it was cage-bred. Smooth transitions, vicious hooks, ground control like a pro. I recognized it instantly. I'd seen those moves in backroom fights back in my youth, where men left blood on concrete floors and walked out with broken teeth. When I squared up across from him in the push-pull contest, the air tasted of sweat and rubber mats. The crowd roared, but for me it was silent. Our hands locked on the rope, our shoulders straining. He grinned at me, lips curled just enough for me to see it wasn't joy. It was a message. I know you're watching me, and you can't stop me. My knees nearly buckled, but I held ground. Years of fighting in underground gyms, years of steel weights and scar tissue, they carried me through. Still, when the whistle blew, he released first, calm as a snake sliding back into grass. The crowd cheered. My chest heaved, but his breath never broke. That night, I drove home with the smell of chalk powder still in my nostrils, the sound of the crowd ringing in my ears. My steering wheel creaked under my grip. He wasn't just hiding something. He was trained. Dangerous. And if he lied about who he was, what else had he lied about? The next morning, things got worse. A detective showed up at my door, eyes scanning my old trophies on the shelf, my calloused knuckles. Mr. Mason, neighbors say they heard shouting between you and your daughter last week. My stomach dropped. I remembered the argument. We fought about Ethan, about the way he controlled her bank accounts. She stormed out crying. Now it sat on record like motive. Are you suggesting I hurt my own child? My voice cracked like breaking wood. The detective's silence was answer enough. By nightfall, whispers spread. That I was bitter. That I'd fought with her days before. That maybe grief was making me lash out, accuse the innocent. But I wasn't the guilty one. Someone was building a cage around me, bar by bar. In the dark of my kitchen, I poured black coffee, the bitter steam rising like smoke. I laid the report on the table. Contradictions leapt off the page. The erased texts, the wrong timeline, the bruises the coroner never explained. And yet, somehow, all fingers were pointing at me. I stared at my reflection in the window. Gray hair at the temples. Scar above my right eyebrow from a fight in '82. I'd promised my daughter once, after a championship win, that I'd always protect her. Now she was gone, and the man who took her from me was turning the world against me. I picked up the phone, thumb hovering over a number I hadn't dialed in years. An old friend. A man who knew the smell of sweat and resin mats as well as I did. Maybe he still owed me a favor. Before I could press the call, headlights swept across my driveway. A car idled there too long, engine humming low, then pulled away. My fists clenched on instinct. They weren't just after my name. They wanted me silenced. The war had started, and I wasn't planning to lose. The next morning came with sirens. Red and blue washed over my living room walls before I even opened the blinds. The knock on the door was hard, official. I opened it to find two officers standing stiff, one with a hand already resting on his holster. "Mr. Mason, we need to ask you a few more questions." Questions. Always questions, but never the right ones. They sat me at my own kitchen table, the air heavy with stale coffee and suspicion. One slid photos across the wood grain, my daughter's bruised arms, the neighbor's statements, my own argument days before. Each image felt like a nail hammered into a coffin with my name on it. "You were seen leaving her house around 10, one officer said. "I was home by then. Alone. No witnesses." "I don't need witnesses. I need the truth." They exchanged a glance, the kind that says we've already decided. By the time they left, my house smelled of sweat and fear. My fear, not of guilt, but of the walls closing in. Ethan was good. Too good. He'd built a story brick by brick, each one laid where I used to stand. I grabbed my old duffel bag from the closet. Inside were scraps of my past, worn gloves, a mouth guard yellowed with time, tape that still smelled faintly of resin. I hadn't planned to run, but I wasn't about to wait around for cuffs either. That evening, I drove the back roads, headlights slicing through fields of frozen grass. Every shadow felt like pursuit, every tail light ahead like a trap. My hands were steady, though, old instincts returning. I knew what it meant to be hunted. I'd been the hunter once. By midnight, I found myself parking outside a place I hadn't stepped into for years, the old wrestling club. The building sagged with age, bricks dark with water stains, but the banner still hung crooked above the door, Miller's Gym. I pushed inside. The smell hit me first, sweat, leather, liniment, and dust. Memories clung to the walls like posters half peeled. And there he was, Paul Miller, once my sparring partner, later my drinking buddy. Always the kind of man who could throw you through a wall and then buy you a beer. His hair was gray now, tied back, his shoulders still wide as a doorframe. "Jesus, Mason," he said, stepping out of the shadows. "Thought you were dead." "Not yet." He studied me a long time, his gaze sharp as a referee's whistle. "You look hunted." "I am." I told him about Ethan, the police, the bruises that didn't fit the story. His face stayed still, but his hands flexed like he wanted to hit something. "Son-in-law, huh?" he muttered. "Figures. Men like him hide their fists until they need them." I saw him fight. He's trained, Paul. Not just gym trained. Underground trained. That got a slow nod. "Then you need to train harder." For the next week, we did just that. Mornings began with the sting of cold mats under bare feet, the slap of bodies hitting canvas. He drilled me like we were 20 again. Clinches, reversals, strikes that rattled bone. My lungs burned, muscles screamed, but each day I felt more alive than the years behind a desk ever gave me. At night, Paul fed me whispers. Names of men tied to illegal rings, warehouses where fights took place. The underworld of blood and bets hadn't died. It had only gone deeper underground. But every step forward carried the weight of eyes on my back. Once, leaving the gym, I spotted a sedan idling 2 blocks down, headlights off. Another night, a brick came through Paul's window, shattering glass across the ring. The note tied to it read, "Stop digging." We didn't stop. One night, after hours of drilling sprawls and takedowns, Paul lit a cigarette and said, "You know why your girl died, don't you?" I froze. She found out what Ethan was into. Maybe tried to walk away. That's how these men work. You leave, you don't breathe. The words hit like a steel chair to the skull. My chest tightened, not from exhaustion, but from rage. If that was true, then Ethan hadn't just lied. He dragged her into a pit and locked the door behind her. Still, something in Paul's tone unsettled me. Too certain, too practiced. But I shoved the thought aside. I needed him. I needed anyone. 2 nights later, while combing through online forums for whispers of fight clubs, Paul slammed a flyer on the table. A black card with red lettering, no address, just a date and a number. Underground Invitational. Tomorrow, Ethan might be there. The paper smelled of smoke and sweat, like it had already been passed through too many hands. My pulse quickened. Finally, a lead. But before I could even plan, headlights swept across Paul's office again. We froze. The shadows outside shifted. Then came the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, circling the building. Paul reached under the desk, pulled out a length of steel pipe. He grinned like the old days, but his eyes didn't match the smile. Too cold, too knowing. Careful, Mason, he said. Once you step into their ring, there's no way out. I stared at him across the flickering light of a single bulb. For the first time since running, I wondered if I'd chosen the right ally. Outside, the footsteps stopped. The night went still, but inside, something had already shifted. Paul knew more than he let on. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't on my side at all. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old gym, every gust of wind through the cracked window, sounded like a boot on broken glass. Paul sat across from me at the battered desk, smoking, his face half hidden in the haze. He looked too calm for a man who claimed to be hunted. "Relax, Mason," he said. "They're just trying to spook you." I didn't answer. My gut was chewing itself raw. By morning, the gym smelled of stale smoke and dust. Paul stretched, bones cracking like knuckles, then tossed me a pair of gloves. "Ring time. If you're going to face him, you'll need more than suspicion." We spent hours in the cage, sweat slicking the mats. He pushed me hard. Body shots that stole my breath, takedowns that rattled my spine. My legs trembled, but every hit sharpened me. Anger made me faster. Loss made me relentless. "Good," Paul muttered. "You're remembering who you were." But between drills, I caught him on the phone, voice low, sentences clipped. When he noticed me watching, he smiled too quickly, stuffing the phone into his pocket. That smile scratched at my nerves like sandpaper. That evening, we followed the black flyer's instructions, a text to the number printed in blood-red ink. The reply came quick. "Dockyard. Midnight. Don't be late." We drove in silence, the city shrinking behind us, warehouses rising like tombstones by the water. The night smelled of oil and rust, the kind of air that clings to your throat. At the gate, two men in black jackets checked our names, aliases Paul had prepared. They frisked us, then waved us inside. The warehouse pulsed with noise. Metal halogens buzzed overhead, throwing sharp shadows across a circle of chain link. Men and women pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces hungry, bills clenched in fists. The air reeked of sweat, beer, and blood already spilled. A fighter crashed into the fence, his cheeks splitting open against the steel. The crowd howled. Cash changed hands faster than punches landed. Paul leaned close, his breath hot in my ear. "Keep your head down. Just watch." I did, until I saw him. Ethan. He walked into the cage bare-chested, shoulders gleaming under the lights. Calm, cold, like he belonged there. He bounced on his toes, loose and confident, the same way he'd moved at that charity tournament. Except here, there was no mask of politeness. His eyes were predator's eyes. His opponent was bigger, heavier, but it didn't matter. Ethan dismantled him piece by piece. A feint, a hook, a knee to the ribs that echoed through the warehouse. The man dropped gasping, and Ethan didn't even break stride. He finished with a chokehold so clean it looked rehearsed. The crowd roared. Ethan didn't acknowledge them. He just slipped out of the cage, wiping his face with a towel, expression unreadable. My chest burned. I wanted to storm down there, grab him by the throat, and scream, "What did you do to her?" But Paul's hand clamped down on my arm. "Not yet. You jump in now, you'll never walk out." I swallowed the rage, but my nails dug crescents into my palms. We slipped out before the final fight ended. The dockyard air felt colder, sharper, like knives on my skin. I leaned against the car, breathing hard. "You saw him," Paul said. "That's your proof." "It's not enough. I need the why." Paul exhaled smoke. "The why? He's in deep. These men don't let you walk away. If your daughter found out, he didn't finish. He didn't have to." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. His words sounded rehearsed, too easy. 2 days later, another crack appeared. I broke into Ethan's garage while he was at work. The smell hit me first, leather polish, disinfectant, sweat. In the corner sat a duffel bag. Inside, wraps still stained with dried blood, a mouth guard, and a burner phone. I scrolled through the messages. Payment cleared. Next fight scheduled. Keep her quiet. My breath froze. Keep her quiet. I snapped photos with my phone, hands trembling. Then headlights flashed across the driveway. Ethan. He was home early. I slipped out the side door, heart hammering like a drum, and dove behind a row of trash bins. He walked in, whistling, casual. Too casual. He carried groceries, set them on the hood of the car, then paused. Turned his head slightly. For a moment, I swore he was looking straight at me. But then he went inside. I stayed crouched in the stink of garbage until my legs cramped. When I finally stood, sweat cold on my back, I knew one thing. I wasn't paranoid. He was hiding something, and someone was helping him hide it. That night, back at the gym, I laid the burner phone photos on Paul's desk. He studied them, face blank. Strong evidence, he said finally. More than evidence. This proves he's tied in. It proves my voice cracked. He killed her. Paul lit another cigarette, the flame briefly cutting his face into sharp lines. Careful, Mason. Proof can make you reckless. I leaned forward, anger boiling. Why do you keep telling me to be careful? Whose side are you on? For the first time, Paul's eyes hardened. Cold, flat. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. The room felt smaller, air thick with smoke and silence. I stared at him, pulse pounding. He didn't blink. That's when I knew. My oldest friend was playing 2 games, and I was the piece he was moving. I lay awake on the mat that night, staring at the rafters. My daughter's laugh haunted me, faint as chalk dust in the air. Ethan was a killer, or worse, a puppet for men who made killing into business. And Paul was part of something I hadn't yet named. But I would. Because if the past taught me anything, it's this. In a fight, the man who looks calmest is usually the one sharpening the knife. And I wasn't about to let them cut me without swinging back. I used to think I knew what shadows looked like. Dark alleys after a street fight. Smoke-filled locker rooms where bets were whispered louder than prayers. But those were child's games compared to this. Paul drove us through the outskirts one night, past shuttered factories and rusted billboards. He didn't explain, just kept smoking, headlights carving tunnels in the dark. My gut screamed trap, but I stayed silent. Sometimes you learn more by waiting for the punch. We ended up at a warehouse larger than the one by the docks. This place had guards with earpieces, SUVs lined in neat rows, and men with suits sharp enough to cut glass. Money, power, organized crime dressed in cologne. Inside, the ring wasn't a cage anymore. It was a pit sunk into the concrete, lights blinding from above, cameras circling like vultures. This wasn't just fighting. This was broadcast, for the rich, for the connected, for people who never dirted their hands but loved watching others bleed. And Ethan was at the center. He stepped into the pit wearing black trunks, body gleaming under the floodlights. The crowd roared his name, not Ethan, but an alias, the Wolf. My stomach twisted. They didn't see him as my son-in-law, as a grieving husband. To them, he was a brand, a machine. The fight was brutal. No gloves, no referee. Just 2 men locked in a storm of fists and knees. Ethan moved like a predator unleashed, calculated, merciless. When he finished, his opponent lay limp, chest barely rising. The crowd cheered louder. Bills flew into the pit. Ethan walked away without looking back. Paul clapped slow, almost proud. See? He's deeper than you think. I shot him a glare. And you? How deep are you in? He smirked, smoke curling from his lips. Deep enough to know when to pick the winning side. The words cut deeper than any punch. Later, back in the car, I broke the silence. You've been feeding them information. Paul didn't even flinch. And you've been feeding me anger. Balance, Mason. You needed training. I gave it. I needed a way back into their good graces. You gave me that. You sold me out. He turned his head, eyes glinting in the dashboard light. I kept you alive. My fists ached from gripping the seat. I wanted to break his jaw then and there. But I forced my breath steady. Rage wins fights in alleys. Strategy wins wars. The next days blurred into a haze of hiding and digging. I used every contact I had left, old gym buddies, ex-bouncers, even a bartender who once patched me up after a bar brawl. Piece by piece, a picture formed. The underground circuit wasn't just fights. It was money laundering, trafficking, extortion. Ethan wasn't just a fighter. He was a commodity. His wins brought in bets. His reputation brought in clients. And my daughter? She'd found out. One man, jittery from coke, told me she'd been seen backstage weeks before her death. She argued with Ethan, said she'd go to the police. Days later, she was dead from a fall. My knuckles went white around my glass. But there was more. A whisper passed between fighters like a curse. She's not gone. At first, I thought it was just rumor, the way men romanticize tragedy. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. Some believed she was alive, hidden, used as leverage against Ethan to keep him fighting. The possibility hit me like a knee to the ribs. If she was alive, then every drop of rage I'd spilled was misdirected. Ethan wasn't just a liar. He was trapped. I confronted Paul that night. The gym was empty, rain tapping on the windows, the ring slick with damp. Tell me the truth. Is she alive? Paul leaned against the ropes, cigarette glowing. Rumors. You knew, didn't you? My voice cracked like a whip. He shrugged. Knowing and proving are different things. But yes, she might be breathing somewhere she shouldn't. The floor tilted under me. Anger, hope, fear, all at once. I grabbed him by the collar. And you didn't tell me? He didn't flinch. Because you'd have rushed in and died by now. And she'd still be chained up, if she's even there. I released him, disgust twisting in my chest. My friend, my ally, my betrayer, all in one. That night, I returned home to find my front door ajar. Inside, drawers pulled open, papers scattered. They'd searched everything. On the table lay a single photo, my daughter, smiling, alive. Written across it in red marker, stay out. My legs buckled. Hope and fury fused into something sharp. She was alive. They wanted me scared. Instead, they'd lit a fire. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the photo, tracing her face with my finger like a prayer. Ethan's voice echoed in my head, calm and cold in the ring, but maybe, just maybe, carrying chains heavier than mine. And Paul, he was the key. Not because I trusted him, but because he was the only one still playing both sides. The rules of this fight had changed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Hers, his, mine. And when the final bell rang, someone wasn't walking out. I've been betrayed before. In the ring, it happens when a sparring partner takes the cheap shot, when a coach throws in the towel too late. On the streets, it happens when a man promises backup and vanishes the moment knives flash. But betrayal from someone you once called brother, that cuts the deepest. Paul's betrayal came slow, like poison seeping through old scars. It started with a call. A number I didn't recognize, voice distorted. We know you've been digging, Mason. Time to stop. Tomorrow night, the gym. Midnight. Come alone. The line went dead. I paced the kitchen, fists clenching until my knuckles whitened. I didn't believe in coincidences. Someone knew my movements too well. Too precisely. Only one man had that kind of access, Paul. Still, I showed up. Because sometimes the only way to flush out a rat is to walk straight into the sewer. The gym was dark except for one bulb swinging above the ring. Shadows stretched across the mats like ropes. I stepped inside, the boards creaking under my boots. Paul. My voice echoed, hollow. A figure stepped out. Not Paul. Two men, broad, dressed in black. Their eyes were flat, hands heavy with brass. Boss wants a word, one said. I swung first. Old habits. My fist cracked against his jaw, the sound sharp as snapping wood. He staggered, but the other lunged, arms like steel cables. We crashed to the mat, rolling, sweat and dust filling my mouth. I twisted, slammed an elbow into his ribs, scrambled free. But more boots thundered from the shadows. 5, maybe 6. Too many. They beat me down methodically. Ribs, kidneys, face. Not to kill, to soften. I tasted blood, copper sharp, dripping into my throat. Then a voice cut through. Enough. Paul. He stepped forward, cigarette glowing like a signal flare. He looked at me the way a butcher looks at a slab of meat. No warmth, no regret, just business. You set me up? I spat blood onto the mat. He shrugged. You made too much noise. They wanted proof you were manageable. Now they've got it. You sold me out for what? A seat at their table? For survival, he said flatly. Something you don't understand. My body screamed, but my rage burned hotter. You think they'll keep you alive? You're just another pawn. Paul smirked. Better a pawn on the board than a king in the ground. They dragged me into a van. The ride was long, silent, filled with the stink of sweat and gasoline. My wrists burned against zip ties. Every bump in the road rattled my cracked ribs. When they pulled the hood off, I was in another warehouse. Bigger, cleaner, cameras mounted on the walls. This wasn't a random beating. This was theater. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward. Silver hair, smile polished like marble. Gerald, the organizer. The kind of man who never touched blood but owned every drop spilled. Mr. Mason, he said, voice oiled with false courtesy. You've been quite the nuisance. I glared. Where's my daughter? His smile widened. Alive. For now. But your interference endangers her. You want her safe? Then you play by our rules. He nodded. 2 guards hoisted me up, shoved me toward the pit. The crowd roared, wealthy men and women in tailored suits, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Bets shouted, bills flying. The announcer's voice boomed. A special appearance. Tonight, a legend from the old streets. Mason. My heart pounded. They'd turn me into part of the show. The fight began before I could catch my breath. A brute stepped into the pit, bigger than me by 50 pounds, muscles stacked like bricks. He swung wild, fists like hammers. I ducked, pain screaming in my ribs, but instinct carried me. Years of training, muscle memory. A slip, a counter, a hook to the jaw. His head snapped back, sweat spraying. The crowd roared. I fed on it, fueled by rage and desperation. My fists found their rhythm, each strike echoing in my bones. The brute staggered, collapsed. But there was no bell. Another fighter entered. Then another. They wanted to break me, to test me, to see if I could bleed enough to entertain them before they decided whether I lived or died. By the 3rd fight, my vision blurred. Blood trickled into my eye, ribs grinding with every breath. Still I stood. Still I swung. Because every punch was for her. Every drop of blood was a promise. At last, Gerald raised a hand. The fight stopped. I collapsed against the cage, chest heaving. Well done, Mr. Mason, he said smoothly. You have spirit. Perhaps that's why your daughter inherited it. My heart seized. Show me she's alive. He only smiled. In time. For now, consider this a demonstration. Cross us again, and she pays the price. The guards dragged me back to the van, dumped me near the river, body aching, head swimming. The city lights shimmered on the water like broken glass. I lay there, blood soaking into the dirt, teeth rattling, but one thought blazed through the haze. She's alive, and if she's breathing, then I still have a reason to fight. I staggered back to the gym at dawn. Paul wasn't there. Coward. Rat. Betrayer. His absence told me everything. He'd picked his side. Fine. I'd pick mine. I stood in the ring, blood dripping onto the mats, the smell of sweat and smoke heavy in the air. My reflection in the cracked mirror showed a man broken, beaten, but not done. Never done. They think they own me, I whispered to the empty room. But they've never seen what I do when they take what's mine. And somewhere in that city, Ethan was still fighting. Not just for money. Maybe for her. The lines between enemy and ally blurred, but it didn't matter. My path was set. I was going to tear their empire down, brick by brick, bone by bone, until I found her. Or die trying. The warehouse reeked of sweat, bleach, and ambition. Chains rattled against steel beams, men shadowboxed in dim corners, and the floor vibrated with a bass line that wasn't music, it was hunger. The hunger to win, to break, to survive. I stepped inside wearing a cap pulled low and a hoodie that smelled faintly of gasoline. No one gave me a second glance. In this place, every man looked dangerous, and anonymity was just another weapon. The first fight roared to life in the cage, a storm of fists and blood. The crowd pressed close, their shouts sharp as broken glass. I didn't look at the fight. My eyes scanned the edges. Guards with earpieces, men exchanging envelopes, a few women with dead smiles clutching plastic cups. And then him, my old training partner, Mark. The same man who'd sworn loyalty, the same one who'd fed me half the puzzle. His arm was slung casually around the ringleader's shoulders, laughing like he belonged here. My gut twisted. Betrayal has a smell. It's sour, metallic, like pennies under the tongue. I pushed deeper into the crowd, heart steady, rage cold. The announcer's voice sliced through the air. Next up, our champion steps into the ring. James Holloway. My son-in-law emerged from the shadows. Shirtless, skin gleaming with oil and sweat, muscles cut like stone. The crowd erupted. He didn't look like a man haunted by secrets. He looked like a predator at home. He flexed, grinned, and raised his fists. And yet, his eyes betrayed him. They flicked to the side for just a second. Hesitation, fear, something unspoken. That was all I needed. I turned to leave, already plotting how I'd corner him afterward, when a heavy hand clamped down on my shoulder. Lost, old man. I looked up. One of the guards, a wall of meat with a scar splitting his eyebrow, sneered down at me. His grip tightened like a vice. I smiled thinly. No, just watching the show. Funny, we don't like strangers watching. He jerked his chin. Two more men moved in, boxing me between them. The cage bell rang. My son-in-law lunged forward, trading blows in a blur, but my attention snapped back to survival. Move, the guard growled. I let him drag me toward a side door, past crates marked only with numbers. The hallway stank of bleach and rust. The deeper we went, the clearer it became. I wasn't being escorted out. I was being buried. The door slammed shut behind us. Another voice slid out of the shadows. Smooth, mocking, familiar. Well, couldn't resist, could you? Mark stepped forward, cigarette glowing between his fingers. His grin was sharp, cruel. Told you to let it go, but you never learned when to quit. I clenched my fists. You sold me out. He shrugged. Business. Besides, you were getting too close. Now you'll disappear, and no one will ask why. The guards moved closer. I tensed, ready to fight, when suddenly, above the muffled roar of the crowd, the cage bell clanged again. And James's voice, hoarse but fierce, echoed down the hall. Don't touch him. Don't touch him. The words cracked through the hallway like a whip. For a second, even the guards froze. My son-in-law's voice, louder, harder than I'd ever heard it, echoed from the pit. Mark's smirk faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it. He ground his cigarette out against the wall and snarled, Get him out of here. Now. The guards lunged. Years fell away from me in an instant. My fists remembered faster than my brain did. I dropped low, rammed my shoulder into the closest guard's ribs, felt the air burst out of him. The other swung wild. My vision tunneled. Pain in my side, blood in my mouth. Didn't matter. I fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Then the cage bell clanged again. The crowd's roar spilled into the hallway like a tidal wave. And suddenly James himself was there, sweat-soaked, chest heaving, eyes locked on me. The guards hesitated. He didn't. He slammed one man into the wall so hard the plaster cracked, then grabbed the other by the collar and threw him headlong into a stack of crates. The crash echoed like thunder. For a heartbeat, the only sound was our breathing. I stared at him. My enemy. My daughter's husband. The man I'd sworn was guilty. And here he was, saving me. His eyes burned, not with malice but desperation. She's alive, he hissed. They've got her. That's why I fight. That's why I can't stop. The floor tilted under me. Alive. He said it like a confession and a prayer. Mark's laugh snapped me back. Touching. Real touching. He drew a knife, its edge glinting under the fluorescent hum. Both of you think you're heroes? You're nothing but dogs fighting over scraps. James moved first, stepping between us. Run, he muttered without looking back. Run? After everything? After the blood, the lies, the bruises? No, I'd buried too much to run now. I stepped up beside him. We finished this. Together. For the first time since my daughter's death, James looked at me not as an accuser, not as a father-in-law, but as an ally. He gave a single nod. The fight was brutal. Knives and fists in a hallway too narrow for breathing. Mark was quick, vicious, fueled by greed and betrayal. He slashed my arm. Fire streaked up my skin. James drove him back with a hook that rattled teeth. We moved like wolves, two predators cornering one that thought himself invincible. When it ended, Mark was on the floor, blood pooling under his head. Still breathing, but barely. The silence afterward was heavier than any roar. James and I stood there, shoulders heaving, sweat and blood mixing. Finally, he said it. Quiet. Raw. I didn't kill her. I fought because they promised me she'd live if I kept winning. They're moving her tonight. Finals. Gerald runs everything. If we don't stop him now, she's gone forever. The words punched harder than any fist. My rage, my grief, it had all been pointed at the wrong target. The enemy wasn't just James. It was bigger, smarter. The men in suits upstairs who treated lives like poker chips. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. Instead, I clenched my fists until my nails cut skin and forced my voice steady. Then we tear them apart. James met my eyes. No smile, just grim resolve. Finals are tomorrow night. That's when Gerald gathers everyone. The money men, the fighters, the guards. It's our only chance. The hallway smelled of rust and blood. My body ached, every rib screaming, but something inside me burned steadier than pain. For the first time since my daughter's death, I had more than suspicion. I had a target. We dragged Mark's body into the shadows and left him breathing just enough to keep him silent. Outside, the night air bit at my cuts. The docks glittered with oily water and neon reflections. James lit a cigarette with shaking hands, the flame trembling. Tomorrow, he said. We finish this. I nodded, though my heart pounded like a drum. Tomorrow wasn't just a fight. It was war. The night of the finals carried a weight in the air. Even the city seemed to know what was coming. Streets were too quiet. The docks too still. The warehouse ahead glowed under floodlights, buzzing like a hive before the swarm. James and I walked side by side, silent. No plan scribbled on paper, no allies waiting in the shadows. Just two men tied by blood and betrayal. Two men with nothing left but fists and fury. Inside, the crowd was a storm. Men in suits, women in gowns, all shouting, betting, laughing with mouths red from wine. Cameras circled the pit, broadcasting brutality to men with deeper pockets somewhere far away. And there he was, Gerald. Tailored suit, silver hair, smile polished until it gleamed. He sat above it all like a king fattening himself on blood. The announcer bellowed. Ladies and gentlemen, the fight of the year. The wolf versus the legend. The crowd howled. I froze. Legend. That was me. James's jaw tightened. They're setting us against each other. I looked at him. My enemy. My ally. My daughter's husband. The man I'd nearly killed in my mind 100 times. Now the crowd wanted us to kill each other for real. We stepped into the pit. The floor smelled of bleach and blood. Chains rattled above. Gerald leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Fight, he mouthed. The bell rang. We circled each other. The crowd's roar blurred into static. James's eyes locked on mine, fierce but pleading. We have to sell it, he hissed. So we did. Fists flew, skin split, sweat sprayed under the lights. He cracked my jaw. I drove a knee into his ribs. Every move rehearsed by instinct, but tempered, just shy of breaking. To the crowd, it was carnage. To us, it was choreography. Then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, a side door cracked open. A shadow moved. My daughter. She was pale, thinner, bound at the wrists, shoved forward by two guards. Her eyes locked on me, wide with shock and hope all at once. My chest nearly tore open. Rage swallowed me whole. I swung harder, driving James into the cage wall. He grunted, then whispered, "Now." We turned. Together. The crowd screamed, thinking it was part of the fight. But we weren't fighting each other anymore. We were fighting them. I tore into the nearest guard, my fists breaking bone, my teeth bared like an animal. James ripped a chain loose from the cage and swung it, steel crashing into skulls. Blood sprayed. Chaos erupted. Gerald shot to his feet, barking orders. but his men faltered under the frenzy. The crowd panicked, shoving toward exits, their wealth useless against fists and fury. We reached her, my daughter, her wrists bruised, her face streaked with tears. I pulled her into me, chains clattering to the floor. For one breath, the world stopped. She was real. She was alive. Gerald's voice thundered behind us. "In this. Kill them." Gunfire cracked. Splinters flew. The cage became a coffin of sparks and screams. We dove low, dragging her behind a barricade of crates. James's arm bled. My ribs screamed, but adrenaline drowned the pain. Then I saw him. Gerald, slipping toward the exit, calm even as the empire he built burned around him. I handed my daughter to James. "Get her out." "No. Do it. I'll finish this." I stalked Gerald through smoke and chaos. He moved like a man untouchable, but his hands trembled just enough to betray him. At the dock's edge, he turned, sneer sharp as a blade. "You think you've won? Men like me don't fall. We buy men like you. We bury them." I didn't answer. Words were wasted on a corpse. I hit him once. Twice. Years of rage, grief, betrayal, all behind my fists. He crumpled against the steel railing, gasping, blood streaking his perfect suit. I leaned close, voice low, steady. "This is for her." And then I left him there, broken, choking on his own lies, while sirens wailed in the distance. Outside, the night air hit me like baptism. James staggered out of the smoke with my daughter clinging to his arm. Her eyes found mine. For the first time in months, she smiled. Weak, but real. We walked away together, the three of us, leaving the screams and flames behind. At the edge of the pier, I stopped, staring back at the warehouse as it burned from the inside. The empire of blood collapsing in its own fire. James placed a hand on my shoulder. No words. None needed. My daughter whispered, voice trembling, "Dad, we're free." I looked at her, then at him, then at the fire. My fists unclenched at last. "Not free," I said quietly, "but alive. And that's enough." A man who has nothing left to lose can burn the whole world down. Tonight, I burned theirs.